police are still trying to sort out exactly what happened. Do police have any idea who did
Just check
this?
with investigators. We can tell you the name of that woman killed. They identify her as 20-year-old Shelbey Thornburgh, and she lived in the apartment building behind me on the 3rd floor.
We're unsure of the motive at the time.
Neighbors say they didn't know 20-year-old Shelbey Thornburgh last night. They say someone killed her, possibly slashing her neck before leaving her in cold blood.
Shelbey was born on the same day I'm recording this episode. Shelbey was born in Wise County, Texas. And if you've never heard of Wise County, Texas, that's okay, because most people in Texas have never heard of Wise County. I debated on whether or not I was going to do a lot of background on Shelbey's life, but the further I got into my research, the more I realized how important it was. Shelbey's life was not easy, and that's a big understatement. Shelbey was born to a single mother who met a man while she was actually pregnant with Shelbey, and that man ended up becoming the only father that Shelbey knew. According to Shelbey's sister, Christina, who has been a huge advocate for Shelbey's case, probably the person she was closest to growing up. According to Christina, their mother was very loving, very motherly throughout the early parts of their lives. She always fixed their hair, family pictures, made sure they were dressed nice and had everything they needed. As dearly as she hoped to be a good mother and had good intentions and started out strong, fell victim to pain pill abuse and was in and out of hospitals. Their father figure had his own vast set of problems, ranging from drug abuse to child charges. To say their home life was unstable again is a really big understatement. From the time that Shelbey and her sister were about 10 to 13 years old, they entered the foster system. Shelbey got pregnant when she was 14 years old by a man who was an adult, who was later sentenced to 18 years in prison for statutory. Shelbey spent a good 4, 5, 6 years bouncing around from foster home to foster home. Temporarily would get sent back to live with her mom, but it never lasted long. Her mother had multiple suicide attempts, multiple hospital stays. Things just kind of went from bad to worse. When Shelbey was 16 years old, she made a Facebook post expressing the heartache she was experiencing as a young mother, how she felt she was used and abused when she was just a child, and a grown man got her pregnant. The grandmother of her baby, the mother of the man that impregnated her, commented on her Facebook post saying, "Quit acting like you were a virgin. You know this was consensual. My son's in jail now because of you." All these things. And that makes me feel a little bit violent, if I'm going to be honest. She tried to make a statement that she understood that what happened to her wasn't legal and it wasn't okay. And she was met with shame and insults. I just want to remind everybody that when you're 14 or 15 years old, you can't consent to sex. If you find yourself thinking that a 14-year-old is capable of consenting to sex with a grown man when she's in 8th grade, she's only been out of diapers for a little over a decade, you probably shouldn't be watching this. You should probably go sit in front of a mirror and reflect for a little while. I know that not all sex workers are victims of trafficking, but most Sex workers are victims of grooming. Shelbey was everything that a groomer could want packaged up in a pretty bow. She was vulnerable and she was lost. She didn't have a dime to her name. She didn't have a family member that could help her get on her feet, but yet she persisted. She tried. In 2011, she gave birth to her son. Within a couple of years, she had given him up for adoption by his foster family. In 2012, her mother died. I think this hit Shelbey very hard. Even though she clearly had a tumultuous relationship with her mother, it was a blow. By October of 2013, it seemed like Shelbey was really making an effort to get her life on track. She often agonized over the pain that it caused her giving up her son. I think Shelbey wanted to be a mother more than anything in the whole world. I think she lived with a lot of guilt and remorse, and that's completely understandable. When you're pregnant at a young age or when you're pregnant in a poor situation, you have a couple of choices that you can make. You can try to be a mother with nothing to help you do that. You can have an abortion. You can give the child up for adoption. And the path that Shelbey took might be the most painful one possible. She had the child. She tried to be a good mother. She tried to make it on her own, and then eventually realized that there was another family out there that could provide him with everything he wanted while she was still being bounced around from foster home to foster home. And she made a really tough call to give up a child that she had been trying her hardest to raise, and she just had to say goodbye to him. I think that really broke her. I think that would really break a lot of people. By late 2013, Shelbey was pregnant again. She was very happy about this. She made a lot of posts just trying to talk about her pregnancy in the way that you or I would, talking about the nausea, talking about the excitement, talking about the names that they had been discussing. And in spring of 2014, Shelbey had a miscarriage. I think it was just more than she could take. A couple of months after that, she was arrested for the first time for prostitution in Dallas, Texas. She told her family that it was a mix-up, that she got framed. She was just there with a friend and got kind of caught up in what her friend was doing, but not to worry. She wasn't doing anything like that. Everything was fine in her life. Shortly thereafter, Shelbey made the big move to Houston, Texas. Now, when you're a girl from a very small town like Brownwood or Olney, Texas, Houston it's bright lights, big city. And it's not exactly clear when she crossed paths with Marcus, who later became her pimp. What I know for sure is that in January of 2014, she was excitedly about to go take her licensing test. And then on March 22nd, 2014, she had a miscarriage. Then on April 5th of 2014, she had her first arrest for prostitution in Dallas, Texas. By October of 2014, she was in Houston. And by November of 2015, she was dead. November 4th, 2015, a Wednesday, marked the final chapter in Shelbey's short life. She had an appointment with a John, and they were to meet at her apartment. At 8:33 p.m., he texted her and said, "Hey, I'm here." A minute later, at 8:34 p.m., he was seen on CCTV walking into her apartment building. He waited outside the elevator for a minute or two, waiting on her to let him up, as only residents could operate the elevators at nighttime. At 8:40 p.m., Shelbey texted her pimp Marcus, "Good, G-U-D." Marcus later told police that this was their safe word they used so that he knew the client had paid and everything was okay. At 8:57 p.m., that same man was seen on CCTV leaving her apartment building. Detective Crowder tells me they believe he was inside of her apartment for only 17 minutes total. When Marcus couldn't get in touch with her a little while later, he went to the apartment. He found her lying face down on the bed, nude, with a huge pool of blood on the floor beneath her.
What is your emergency? Somebody killed my girl.
Detective Dustin Crowder had only been in the homicide unit for about a year at the time of Shelbey's murder. He was on scene right after her murder, and he's always been the lead detective. When we first spoke, it sounded like maybe he was driving or doing something where he didn't have immediate access to his files and facts. However, he never once hit me with the, "I can't answer that," or "I'm sorry, that's evidentiary in nature, so I can't discuss it." He was open and honest and recalled every specific detail related to my questions, despite this being an 8-year-old homicide case in one of the largest cities in America. Let's talk about the crime scene. First, there was some problems, and that was that every cop in town was trying to go get a peek when they heard a nude woman was found murdered. It was very frustrating for detectives as it contaminated the scene before they could lock it down. They had uniformed officers touching all the doors, the elevator buttons, anywhere that there might still be salvageable DNA or evidence. A lot of that had been contaminated. Detective Crowder tells me there was no signs of posing or staging, signatures. She was nude, cut from behind, left to right. According to an excerpt of the autopsy report obtained by Gavin Fish, the cut was long, about 5.5 inches long. The edges of the cut are clean. They are not jagged. The cut goes through various muscles and all the important vessels in the neck, including the jugular vein and the carotid artery. It also goes through bones in the neck and leaves cut marks on her spine. The depth of the cut is around 2.5 inches. The hyoid bone, the larynx, the mid portion of the trachea, the esophagus, and the anterior cervical spine from C3 to C5 were removed and submitted for anthropologic consultation. Unfortunately, we don't know the outcome of those consultations. Essentially, Shelbey was nearly decapitated. The cut was deep and it was precise. There was no hesitation cuts and only a small defensive wound on her wrist, as if she put her arm up at the last second, sensing danger. The weapon was not recovered, but is believed to be something like a chef's knife or a Bowie knife. Detectives assume sex took place, although it can't be 100% proven. And if it did, it's assumed that it was consensual and nothing was against her will at that moment in time. The lack of any visible stains on his light-colored clothing suggests he was nude when she was killed. Despite their belief that he was standing behind her, the blood spray would have been immense and, at minimum, drenched his hands, arm, and sleeves before the knife could even be pulled away. You can see cast-off from the knife on the wall to her right. It's believed she was kneeling on the twin-size bed facing away from him. You can see the ring of spray that extends outside the large pool of blood that seeped through the mattress and out onto the floor after Shelbey, a tiny 5'1" tall, fell forward on the twin mattress, her head hanging off the bed and the wound against the edge of the mattress. Had he been in front of her, his body would have interrupted the blood spray. Detective Crowder told me many things were tested for forensic value, but one single hair that was on her back was very out of place, and they feel confident that it belonged to the killer. The Houston Police Department doesn't have their own state lab or anything that you may be used to hearing about. It's actually outsourced. They have a lot of rules concerning how many items will be tested per case. So when questions get asked, like, why didn't they test every wall, every fiber, every floor tile, every thread on her sheets? It actually isn't quite that simple. Detective Crowder tells me the main lab analyst is a woman who is very vested in Shelbey's case, and they trust she has been very thorough and goes back to reevaluate anytime technology improves. They did test a lot of things for forensic value, including 3 condom wrappers. They all came back useless. They did many tape lifts on her skin, vaginal, oral, and anal swabs, collected fibers and hairs around her and the apartment. But that one hair on her back, a stray dark hair, is the only thing they feel confident will trace back to the killer. They did get DNA, so that's the good news. Unfortunately, it was a partial profile, or what's known as a composite profile, from that hair on her back. Today, that DNA profile sits in the CODIS database, waiting for him to be arrested so it can pop as a match. The profile they have isn't perfect. It's what is known as the composite profile, or just the STR. It's not a full genetic profile, so it can't simply be put into GenMatch or utilized for traditional genetic genealogy analysis. There hasn't been any CODIS hits after all these years, but it's always searching. Unfortunately, the hair sample has been consumed in their efforts to extract the DNA from it. So it can't even be sent off to a company like Parabon that could run new analysis on it to see what could be derived. They are hitting a snag trying to run a familial search in CODIS. Texas is one of the unique states that does allow for familial searches. In 2019, a House bill was passed for arrestees in Texas. So any person even arrested for one of 24 felonies was required to submit a DNA sample. A local DNA lab in the state of Texas may request a familial search with the completion of a checklist and associated documentation. Unfortunately, this documentation has some requirements that Shelbey's killer's DNA does not meet. So far, there has not been a ton of suspects looked into. There's been about 75 solid tips, Detective Crowder tells me, over the past several years that they have exhausted. There haven't been any DNA matches yet. They had one good lead in Chicago with a Navy corpsman. They received a tip saying he was in Houston at the time of the murders, and he looked exactly like their suspect. He was very cooperative. He gave DNA, but it turns out the tip was bad, and the Navy confirmed he was not even in Houston during the murders. They also had a good lead on some brothers in Florida that were arrested for luring and killing a prostitute, and it had similar crime aspects. But again, no CODIS match or evidence they were in Houston. I obtained some exclusive and critically important new information from Detective Crowder recently. I learned the track phone that the killer used was purchased from Walmart, and it was activated starting on October 24th, 12 days before the murder. All outbound calls were from the Southwest Houston Sugarland area that always pinged on freeways or roadways. It never geolocated in a singular residence or home or building. The phone pinged in the Sugarland area many times, and even near Shelbey's apartment in the days leading up to her murder. Now, the Sugarland area is only about 10 to 15 miles from Shelbey's apartment, so we aren't talking about a huge radius. Sugarland is a very suburb of Houston. As soon as you pass the somewhat hit or miss, often sketchy areas of Southwest Houston, you land in Sugarland, one of the 100 best places to live in 2023. We learned the killer called up to 20 different girls over a period of days, making inquiries, seeking out a petite blonde. He seemed to either be hunting for a very specific look or possibly even a very specific person. Keep in mind that these girls posted pictures on their back page ads. Oftentimes their faces were blurred out. Shelbey's face was not blurred out. Detective Crowder tells me he seemed to have a few contingency plans in case his plans with Shelbey fell through. He says Walmart was not extremely helpful to them and pushed back a lot with digging into the purchase information. All track phones at that time that were purchased from Walmart just traced back to the origin of purchase in Pennsylvania, probably a warehouse or a hub of some sort. So they don't know for sure what city or location it was purchased, but at minimum, we know he was in the Southwest Houston and Sugarland area approximately 1 to 2 weeks before Shelbey's murder. The phone was deactivated on November 5th, the day after her murder. Early in the investigation, detectives speculated this could be the work of a budding or established serial killer. I tend to agree with them. When I discovered Shelbey's case was one of only about 25 homicides and sexual assaults publicly listed on the FBI's VICAP site, I was really shocked. Shelbey's case sits alongside just 24 other cold cases dating back to the 1960s. Detective Crowder told me that a woman in the HPD cold case unit enters all the info from violent crimes in their jurisdiction into this database, and something must have triggered alarm bells when the data was cross-referenced. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit looked at Shelbey's case and decided it met the criteria to be possibly serial in nature. I've been obsessed with determining why the VICAP listing says they believe he may have connections to Dallas and New Orleans. According to Detective Crowder, the New Orleans and Dallas connection stemmed from the killer contacting girls with back page ads in those cities. There's been a lot of back and forth discussion about whether or not this was a murder for hire planned by her pimp Marcus, or if this was a complete stranger without any sort of personal motive. I personally am in the camp that This has nothing to do with her pimp. This was not a hitman that killed her. This was not a murder for hire plot. And there's a lot of reasons why. First and foremost, investigators have explicitly stated publicly, almost from the beginning, that Marcus was extensively investigated and they have not been able to find any connection that he could possibly have. Second of all, if we did not have video of this suspect, then I might be inclined to think this was somebody in her life, but we do have video of the person who killed her, and it's obviously not Marcus. Why would he want her dead? One idea is that she was going to leave him. She was trying to better her life, which is fine and all, except for the fact that she was still gainfully employed by him and working for him up until the moment she died. If she had been talking about leaving him, she had not yet. She was his top moneymaker. She was his top recruiter of new talent. Killing her is not something he would do. There's a lot of speculation that she was a confidential informant and she was working with the police and was going to roll over on her pimp. These kinds of theories, I think, could make a lot of sense if you aren't from Houston and you don't really have a grasp on how common prostitution ring busts are, especially in the heyday of Backpage. It was fish in a barrel. Houston is number 2 for trafficking in the United States. It is a major problem in Houston. They have very strong feelings there about prostitution, not only soliciting, but being the solicitor. There are constantly sting operations being run by Houston Police Department, Harris County. In 2014 to 2017, you can find just countless news articles about these sting operations, netting 60-something people at one time, netting 200-something people at one time. It was outrageous. And to think that Shelbey had anything to offer it's just not accurate. What she was doing was small fries. What Marcus was doing was small fries. In my recent conversation with Detective Crowder, he confirmed that he did go meet with HPD Vice very soon after Shelbey's murder, and they confirmed that she was not a confidential informant. She was not working with the police in any way whatsoever. So based on that, all we know is that she was still prostituting for Marcus up until the moment she was killed. There's a fantastic podcast out there with the host Jerry Williams, and recently she had retired agent Michael Harrigan on her show. He was one of the granddaddies of the FBI's VICAP database. As a reminder, VICAP is the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, which is a long acronym for We Think These Dudes Are Serial Killers and Serial Offenders. And he oversaw the development of the web database that law enforcement agencies around the country use today to enter cases of violence, including homicides and sexual assaults. Shelbey's case is one of only 25 homicides that is publicly listed in the FBI's VICAP database. That's a really, really big deal. For a case to meet the criteria that it is potentially serial in nature, there's a handful of criteria it has to meet. It has to seem random. It has to seem motiveless. Things like a hired hitman or revenge or a jaded lover or killing her over an insurance claim or something like that. Those are motives. This means Shelbey's case is one of 25 they felt to list that they believe that deeply is random. It was committed by a stranger, and that it was not personal in nature. So it could have been her, or it could have been a lot of other people. How do they identify homicides that appear to be part of a series? There is an intake form. It is intense. There is criteria and data points that law enforcement agencies would enter. It's everything from the victimology. What did the victim do for a living? How were they killed? What was the point of entry? What do we know about the suspect? Did they bind their victim? Did they handcuff their victim? Did they use a knife, a gun? To submit these cases is completely optional. Every law enforcement agency across the country has access and the ability to do it. Not all of them do. There's currently about 70,000 cases that have been entered in this system. They have analysts that actually scour open source information. You know, they look at news articles, social media to find information about cases that exist in this world, but maybe those law enforcement agencies are not utilizing the entry system. So the FBI has their own analysts that will actually go find cases and they will manually add them in. So it certainly begs the question, what other cases are out there that are like Shelbey's? A few days ago, I drove down to Houston. And I went to her apartment complex. I went to this high rise. The first thing I noticed when I pulled into her apartment complex, there's a square that you drive around the building. It's all reserved parking all the way around. And then there's a gate that it appears you have to have a tag or some sort of remote to open, and there's additional parking. But it's all resident parking. There's no visitor parking anywhere that I can tell. Right at the very front, there is future resident parking, which is where I pulled in. It seems the most likely place that a visitor would park would be the thrift store next door. And then they would walk over, go up this incline. To enter the front doors. When you walk into the building, there's 2 sets of double doors. The first one opens for anybody, and the second one, you can see there's a little keypad on the outside of it, which from what I understand, that second set of doors, either a resident has to let you in past 8 o'clock at night, or you have to have a key card. But once you're in, there's a lobby, it's all mirrored. In the pictures, it looks really nice. It is horrible in person. I went there around 4 p.m. on a Friday. People should have been getting off work early. They should have been drinking. They should have been out by the pool because it was 105 degrees like it is here all the time. There should have been action going on at a place where hundreds of people live at around 4 p.m. on a Friday. There was some workers outside. They looked like they were doing some general maintenance on the outside of the building. Those are the only humans I saw the entire time I was there. When I walked into the building, there was not anybody manning that little area that looks like a receptionist desk. I didn't hear another human. I walked all the way in. The door to the gym was wide open. There's 2 elevators on either side of that set of stairs. There's an elevator here and an elevator here. When I hit the elevator button to go up, that's when I can't really explain it. It was just a really bad feeling. I got into that elevator and it was so dark. Now they have cameras everywhere. There's cameras in each of the elevators. There's cameras in all the hallways. There's cameras everywhere. But back in 2015, there was not. I could hardly even see my hand in front of me in the elevator. It was so dark. I go up to the 3rd floor, which is where Shelbey lived, and I get out in the hallway. There's no windows in the hallways, so it's very, very dark. It felt like the kind of place where you'd film a Rob Zombie movie, if that makes any sense. It felt so scary. Initially, I was a little bit nervous about going in. I just kind of had this adrenaline going because I was afraid somebody was going to be like, "What are you doing, lady? Why do you have your phone out? What are you recording?" And I was just like, oh, what am I going to say to them for why I'm being a creep around in this building with my phone out? Slowly that was replaced with just this really bad anxiety and energy about the fact that there was nobody, absolutely nobody around. I didn't hear anybody talking. I didn't hear a TV. I didn't hear a voice. I didn't see another human for the entire 20 minutes or so that I was there inside this building. And when I made it all the way down to the end of the hall to where Shelbey's apartment was, I just, like, seeing a baby bouncer outside the door, like a new baby bouncer had been delivered, just, it gave me the grossest feeling knowing what went on behind that door and within those walls. And there's a baby crawling around on those floors. I can't describe it any way other than it was just such a bad feeling. I just kind of took some quick video, and I'm not a big chicken. Like, I do a lot of dumb things, a lot of things that other people might find dangerous. Like, my hands were trembling the whole time I was in there. My body felt so shaky, and I can't really explain why. I go back down the elevator. It couldn't get me down 3 floors fast enough. I got off, and looking back, I'm like, gosh, why didn't I just get some better pictures? Why didn't I do some panoramic views of the lobby, since nobody was around to ask me what I was doing? I just wanted to get out of there as fast as I could. I didn't want to be in there. I wanted out. When I've started looking at people who have posted pictures on Instagram that are tagged at the Conquistador apartments, it's weird. It's just weird. There's just girls that, many of them live at that building. They post about their Mercedes and their money, and I don't understand why any of these girls would be living there. And that's kind of when it occurred to me that I don't think they are living there. I kind of wonder if having an apartment there is sort of like their office. The apartment is very staged. It's very barren. There's like a mirror, a bed, a TV, but no personal belongings. There's no pictures on the wall. There's no laundry on the floor. It looks like a corporate apartment in a way. So I have my suspicions about maybe what all is going on in that apartment building. I have my suspicions about, did Shelbey even live there? Her sister, Christina, explicitly states that yes, she did live there, and she converted her living room into a workplace where she did in-calls. She also did out-calls, according to her Backpage listing. Maybe that's exactly what she was doing. But some of these other girls I'm looking at, there's a lot of areas in and around Houston that are affordable. They are not very expensive to live, and they are so much safer and cleaner than this apartment building. So for the life of me, I can't figure out why Shelbey or any of these other girls would live there. I think Shelbey wanted to break the cycle. The cycle of having children that you couldn't care for because you were too young or too ill or too broken. I think her miscarriage in 2014 was a turning point. I think she thought becoming a mother, a good mother, was the only way she was ever going to rebuild all the broken pieces inside of her. With regards to her choices for work in the short time before she was murdered, I've said something in regards to a lot of different cases and a lot of different situations. I'll say it again now here because it holds true more than ever. Broken people do broken things. If you haven't walked a mile in Shelbey's shoes, then maybe you don't really understand how she got to where she was and why she did the things she did. But I get it. Shelbey never had protection and security that we expect and need from our parents. Shelbey wasn't a whore. She was a survivor. She had nothing and nobody, and she did whatever she needed to do to try to claw her way out of the life she had known. I do believe that if Shelbey was giving a little bit more time, she would have broken the cycle. She would have broken free from the statistics that dominated her entire life. A stranger took that from her. A stranger left her nude and alone, butchered in a dirty apartment. She didn't deserve it, and she didn't ask for it. And if it hadn't been her, it would have been somebody else. Shelbey was easy prey for a deranged coward. I beg you to study this video, to study this man captured on this video, because somebody knows who he is. He is tall. He was pretty young in 2015. He has dark hair with a dramatic receding hairline. He has a little bit of bitch tit, as you can see. He's the kind of guy who wears cargo shorts in November. Many people believe he comes from a military background. If you've been to Fort Hood or any of the areas surrounding Houston, think if you remember anybody who might look like this or might have looked like this in 2015. Look at the way he walks. Look at his mannerisms. Think of somebody who maybe kicked out of the military, dishonorably discharged, didn't cut it. He might have been from the Sugarland or Southwest Houston or Missouri City, Texas area. He might have family from those areas. He likely did not start with Shelbey, and he likely will not stop with Shelbey. If she was the first, she might have been practiced because she was an easy target. He might move on to children, your mother, your sister, somebody who's not a sex worker, somebody who might be a sex worker. People like this don't stop until they are caught or they are dead. I want to leave you with a Facebook post that Shelbey made when she was 18 years old. It reads, "Have you ever got to that point in your life where you feel as if you've been surrounded by a concrete wall that's too high to climb, too thick to break? People call me a survivor, a fighter, strong-minded, and don't let anything get me down. I'm none of that. Behind my smile is hurt, depressed, stressed, fear. A fear-filled girl. It seems like there's no time for me to cry, scream, because I'm stuck trying to help others and carry the entire weight of the world on my shoulders. I'm so busy letting others cry on my shoulders, I don't have a shoulder to even lean on. I have many regrets in my life. And I would do anything, give anything, just to turn back time and do things differently, wisely, not let the pressure of society and statistics interfere with my life and judgments. I would be more responsible with my heart, and I'd love just a little bit harder, laugh just a little bit louder, and smile just a little bit bigger. I would go back and I would tell the ones that I have hurt, I love them, and I'm sorry. I can't change the past, I know. But it doesn't hurt to ask for forgiveness and work to better yourself. So that's what I'm doing. Same girl, same